Friends, I, Deepak Kannal, the ex-Dean of Faculty of Fine Arts, MS University of Baroda, welcome you to the third module of the program in Aesthetics and Philosophy for the PG course in Visual Arts. We took a note of the chronological development in Indian and Western aesthetics in the previous session. And now we are going to pick up the threads from the early phase of Indian aesthetics, that is the pre-Bharata and Bharata period. Just to brush up the things which we discussed in the previous session, I'll remind you that there are a few scholars who perhaps worked before Bharata, like Shilalin and Krushashva, and there are a large number of scholars who perhaps followed Bharata in the 2nd century, and the names also we mentioned: Kohala, Dhurtila, Dattila, Matrugupta, Badarayana, etc. Now, this gives a suggestion that whatever Bharata did was perhaps not a work which was done single-handedly. If you see the nature of Natya Shastra is a huge compendium. I was telling you yesterday that it tries to touch upon every aspect of theatre. A person, and even today, you know that the people who are involved in theatre, they do not know every aspect of theatre. The text, the manuscript, the locale, the makeup, the acting, the literature, everything is not known to a single person, because drama is a composite activity. Drama is an activity which normally is done by a group. Even in films, the director is different, the actor is different. The actor cannot do the director's job, the director cannot do the actor's job. But Bharata knows about everything. Bharata writes about every aspect of drama, which sounds a little curious. And that is why there are quite a few scholars who are of the opinion that Bharata is not the writer of Natya Shastra, Bharata is the compiler of Natya Shastra. There must be several different people who have worked on different aspects of theatre in the earlier period, and Bharata must have compiled all that material and put it together, edited it together into a single compendium. And this possibility sounds quite plausible, because if you try to recollect which I narrated in the previous session, that the art of theatre was given to Bharata. Bharata was quite disturbed by the sufferings of the common people, and then he approached Brahma to help him, that something should be done for these common people, because normally one tries to get rid of his miseries, his sorrows, with the help of knowledge. But in those days, there were quite a few people, like women did not have access to knowledge, the downtrodden people did not have access to knowledge. So Bharata said that they should have something that can help them to come out of their sorrows and miseries. And then Brahma acquired the Natya Shastra from Shiva. Now this hierarchy is very, very interesting. Shrikantha is Lord Shiva. So Lord Shiva handed over the Natya Veda, the Panchama Veda. There are 4 Vedas. The 5th Veda was handed over to Brahma, and then Brahma handed over that Veda to 18 mortals. This particular number gives me a feeling that Bharata must be one of the scholars, not the only scholar in Natya Shastra at that time. Because this Natya Veda was handed over to 18 mortals, and Bharata is one of the mortals. Mortals are the human beings. 18 human, Bharata was one of them. And those 18 mortals, they also must have contributed to the art of theatre. So this is very interesting that Shiva is not directly handing it over to Bharata. He is handing it over to Brahma. Brahma is giving it to 18 mortals. Bharata is one of the mortals, and then he comes up with a huge text like Natya Shastra. So what we derive from this is this art of theatre. It came into existence, and there were so many people working on it, and then finally Bharata compiled the text, which was handed over to the next generations, and all these scholars whom we know, who are considered to be Bharata's children, Bharata's sons, they must be his pupils who popularized the art of theatre in the later period. Now, in the previous session I told you that Kohala is a very important scholar, Badarayana is another important scholar, Dhurtila, Dattila are very important scholars. We have already talked about it, and we also noticed that their names have been mentioned in Panini's Ashtadhyayi, which is a very, very early text. It is a pre-Bharata text. Now, which is a pre-Bharata text. On this background, the Bharata, the Natya Shastra should be studied. Now, as I told you earlier, that Natya Shastra is a Shastra Grantha. In the first module, we talked about the Shastra Granthas and the Lakshana Granthas, the symptomatic text and the theoretical text. And Natya Shastra has been given the status of a Shastra Grantha. It does not mean that it doesn't discuss the technicalities of theatre. It does. It gives a long discussion on the technicalities of the theatre, but sometimes he makes some statements which are essentially theoretical statements and which give you a deeper understanding of the art of theatre. One of the statements which has done is very, very important and which can be an answer to Plato's statement. Now, Plato and Bharata do not know each other. This is very interesting that Bharata is giving an unknowing reply to Plato. Now, Plato believed that art is imitation. Art is a copy. It is mimesis. But Bharata says that Natyam Bhavanu Kirtanam. While defining theatre, he has used a term Anukirtanam, not Anukaranam. He doesn't say Natyam Bhavanukaranam. Natyam Bhavanu Kirtanam. Now, isn't it very curious that as it is, what can you imitate? You can imitate the thing which is tangible. If I want to, now all of you are practicing artists and you know that if there is a cup in front of you, you can draw the cup as it is and that will be an imitation of that object. But if the cup is not there and if you are expected to draw it, is it an imitation? You are relying on your memory. You are relying on your understanding of that cup. So you are not imitating, you are creating something different. So there is a difference between the two. Similarly, if the object is not a mundane object like a cup or a chair or a table, an object which is a tangible object, imitating those things will be even more difficult. Bhava is something which actually does not exist. What is bhava? हम दिखा सकते हैं इसको भाव कहते हैं, उसको भाव कहते हैं. Bhava is an experience, which is an abstract experience. Now, imitating that bhava is difficult. You can imitate an action. You can imitate the expression of the bhava. The way a person gets angry, perhaps you can imitate that person. How a particular teacher gets angry and you can imitate that person. कि शर्मा जी इस तरह से गुस्सा हो जाते हैं. You are not imitating the bhava, you are imitating the expression of the bhava. Bhavanukaranam as it is not possible, and he is not talking about Bhavanukaranam, he is talking about Bhavanukirtanam, Anukirtan. So understanding the bhava and recreating that bhava once again is theatre. Now he's try to understand, he's talking something very, very interesting. Normally, though, since these statements are very brief statements. Actually, the problem with Indian philosophical writing is all the writing is in the form of sutras, and these sutras are very brief sutras. So they lend themselves for further interpretation. And if they are not interpreted in the given context, you cannot really fully understand them. Such a small statement, Natyam Bhavanu Kirtanam, probably while if you try to read Natya Shastra on your own, you might miss this statement. You may not take cognizance of this statement, but this statement is very, very important. And he has made a very important observation about the art of theatre in that small statement, Natyam Bhavanu Kirtanam. When he goes further, he talks about bhavas, Bhavanu Kirtanam. Now what are these bhavas? Bhavas are emotions. Bhavas are sentiments. And you know that all of us have bhavas. It's a very mundane thing. It's a very ordinary thing. There is no sane person on the earth who does not have sentiments or emotions. So how these emotions become a work of art is the question. Now here there are so many scholars who have tried to compare Aristotle and Bharata, because Aristotle is also a person who talks about emotions and sentiments in his theory. But the basic difference between the Aristotelian approach to sentiments and their expression and Bharata's approach is different. Aristotle is talking about draining out of emotions. Aristotle is talking about an involuntary purification of emotions, involuntary purgation of emotions. He believes it is almost like Bhasa's understanding of emotions. In one of the plays of Bhasa, when Rama, Sita was abducted by Ravana, and then Rama is lamenting. He's running from one tree to another tree. He is embracing those trees and he is lamenting, Ha Site, Ha Site. Now Lakshmana is always portrayed as a more realistic person in Ramayana. So Lakshmana asks him that what are you doing? You know that you are an incarnation of the Lord himself. You are the Lord. You also know that you are born on this earth for a particular mission. This is going to happen. Ravana was going to take away Sita. We are going to go there and kill Ravana. So itna chilla kyun rahe ho? Why are you lamenting so much? You know the future. And Rama says that he says Puro pide tadagasya parivaha pratikriya. Rama says at this juncture I am a human being and my emotions are not different than the common man's emotions. Puro pide tadagasya parivaha pratikriya. When the when the pond gets flooded, it is bound to be overflown. Similarly, when the emotions get flooded, they are bound to be overflown, and these are human emotions because I am a human being at this juncture. Now here it is very close to Aristotelian thinking. Aristotle talks about the emotions in a similar fashion, that when the emotions get powerful, they are bound to drain out. But Bharata's understanding of emotions is different. Bharata is trying to understand emotions on a different level. He considers those bhavas, he believes that these emotions are exalted to the level of rasa. In Aristotelian thinking, the emotions are drained out. In Bharata's thinking, the emotions are elevated to the level of rasa. And that rasa is Bharata's contribution. The theory of rasa is Bharata's contribution. We know Bharata for the Rasa Siddhanta. And he himself, while talking about rasa, raises a question. We know that the literal meaning of rasa is juice. And when we say the rasa in art, we certainly do not talk about the juice in art. There is no juice in it. So obviously the word rasa is being used as a metaphor. All these theories, whether it is catharsis, whether it is rasa, whether it is dhvani, every term that has been used in philosophical thinking is analogical terminology, is metaphorical terminology. Because it is practically impossible to translate such an abstract idea into words. So naturally they try to find out a word which goes closer to it, which goes parallel to it. This is a metaphorical term which Bharata uses. And he says, ki rasa iti kap padartha. He gives his interpretation of rasa. Ki rasa iti kap padartha. Uchyate aswadyatvat. What is rasa? Rasa cheez kya hai? It is said that whatever that can be relished is rasa. The relishable part of an expression is rasa. But how does it get relishable is discussed later in his Rasa Sutra. So at that juncture, Bharata tells us about the sthayi bhavas and the relations between the sthayi bhava and the rasas. Now this is a very interesting notion which Bharata introduces. Which Bharata has introduced. He talks about sthayi bhava, not bhava. Sthayi bhava is principal mood or principal sentiments. Now how exactly he wants to differentiate between ordinary moods and principal moods is not very clear. He has given a status of sthayi bhava only to 8 sentiments. And those 8 sentiments, perhaps he must have derived those sentiments from human instincts. But the rest of the sentiments have been given a lesser statement which he calls Vyabhichari bhavas. There are 36 of such sentiments which come later, which have been given a status of a transient bhava. 8 principal sentiments only have a capacity, only have a potential to get elevated to the level of rasa according to Bharata. And in the 18th shloka, he says, Shrungara hasya karuna Raudra Veera Bhayanakaha Bibhatsa Bhuta Sanyocha Iti Ashta Natya Rasasmataha. Shrungara, Hasya, Karuna, Raudra, Veera, Bhayanaka, Bibhatsa and Adbhuta are the 8 rasas according to Bharata in theatre. And then after one shloka, he tries to relate each rasa with a particular bhava. He says, Ratir hasasya sokasya, krodhotsahot bhayam tatha, jugupsa vismayascheti, sthayi bhavaha prakirtitaha. which means that the rasa called Shringara is associated with a sthayi bhava called Rati, which can be translated as Eros in English. The second rasa, Hasya, he is associated with Hasa. Hasa is mirth in English. Karuna obviously is associated with pathos, that is Karunya or Shoka, and Raudra is associated with Krodh, anger. Now these things are discussed on the primary level also, but we are just taking cognizance of it. Veera is associated with Utsaha, Velor. Bhayanaka is associated with Bhaya, that is fear. Bibhatsa is associated with Jugupsa, which means repulsion, and the eighth one, Adbhuta, is associated with Vismaya, that is wonder. Now, in Romanticism, art is considered to be the resurrection of wonder, but that has nothing to do with this particular rasa. This rasa is only one of the rasas. Only 8 rasas have been discussed by Bharata. The 9th rasa is a later addition. Perhaps it is added to this list in Gupta period. We are not very sure when, but it certainly is not invented by Bharata. The 9th rasa is Shanta rasa, and the sthayi bhava of 9th rasa is Nirveda, that is absence of any bhava. All the earlier rasas are associated with a bhava. Shanta rasa is beyond all the bhavas, beyond all the sentiments, and that is why the sthayi bhava is Nirveda over there. Now these the sthayi bhavas, how do they get elevated, how do they get exalted to the level of rasa, is explained through a very small sutra. I was telling you that these sutras are very deceptive. They appear to be very insignificant and very small, but they need to be interpreted in various contexts. So to explain that, he makes a statement where he says, Vibhava anubhava vyabhichari sanyogat rasa nishpatti. I'll repeat it again. Vibhava anubhava vyabhichari sanyogat rasa nishpatti. If we try to translate it in simple terms, it means Vibhava, Anubhava and Vyabhichari bhava, they come together and the confluence results into rasa. Now we will have to understand what Vibhava, Anubhava and Vyabhichari bhava are, because these are the terms introduced by Bharata himself. For Vibhava, he himself gives some parallels while talking about Vibhava. He says that Vibhava could be also understood as Karana or Nimitta or Hetu, purpose or the reason or the Nimitta, which means that whatever causes the expression of that sentiment may be understood as Vibhava. Now, the first thing that we will have to understand, when we have talked about it briefly earlier also, that bhava is an abstract experience. And for every abstract thing, there has to be a tangible expression. They say that even the greatest thing like truth. If the truth is not spelt out, if I do not translate the truth into words, the truth is not a truth. Suppose if I understood the universal truth, the ultimate truth, and if I don't spell it out, the truth will remain in my mind. It will not be a truth. So every abstract thing needs a body. Every abstract thing needs a carrier. Every dharma needs a dharmi. Here dharma is not religion. Dharma means the property. Every property has to be expressed. Yesterday we talked about it briefly, but we need to repeat it even today. That every property, whether it is speed, whether it is color, whether it is any other element, it is possible to explain those things only when it is borne by something. Speed can be explained only with the help of speedy object. Whiteness can be explained only with the help of a white object. If a person has not seen a white object in his life, it is practically impossible for you to explain what white is to him. You can't do that. So there has to be a dharmi, there has to be a bearer of that particular guna or that particular bhava. So when we are talking about the bhava and the expression of that bhava, there has to be some nimitta, some karan or some bearer to bear that bhava to the spectator. Now see, we are talking about the process of theatre. Though Bharata repeatedly claims that his theory is applicable to other arts also, because every art has an element of theatricality in it. But at the same time, when he explains it, he essentially explains it in the context of theatre. So what exactly, how do we go about theatre? A text is there. That text is being enacted. He is talking about the performance of the theatre, not the text. He is not talking about the manuscript. He is talking about the actual performance. So when the manuscript is being performed on the stage, how do we go about it? The person, if I am acting like Rama, I will have to understand the emotions of the Rama. How in a particular situation that protagonist of the play would enact. Now the problem at this juncture is Rama is a Lokottar Purusha. Ram is not an ordinary person. He is an incarnation of the God. Now if I try to imagine how Rama would behave in a certain circumstances, how can I imagine कि भगवान कैसे behave करेंगे इस मामले में? Under these circumstances, how the God would react? I can't imagine it, because I'm not a God. I'm an ordinary human being. So at that juncture, Bharata gives us a concession. He calls it Sadharanikaran. He says that since what we are acting is worldly life of Rama, Rama should be treated as a common man. So Rama's Rati, Rama's Shoka. Just now I told you that Rama started lamenting like a common man. Bhasa portrayed him lamenting like a common man, because Bhasa portrayed him like a common man. So here, for him, it is a character on the proscenium. So here, Sadharanikaran, his emotions have been brought down to the level of a common man. I will have to imagine those emotions and try to express those emotions to my audience. So I am the carrier of those emotions, I am the carrier of those words which have been written by the playwright. So I am taking those words with me, trying to imagine those emotions, and with that package I am presenting myself to my audience. Now when I go there, I will have to do something over there. I will have to enact over there to communicate those emotions to my audience. So the person who is carrying those emotions is called Vibhava. And Vibhava, there are two types of Vibhava according to Bharata. One is Alambana Vibhava. Alambana Vibhava is the actual carrier of that emotion. But only Alambana Vibhava is not enough to communicate those emotions very effectively, because they need some external help, some external support also. If the character of Rama is presented in everyday clothes, the impact will not be proper. So naturally, he will have to have a certain kind of costume. He will have to be presented in a certain kind of locale. He will have to carry a dhanusha, or he will have to carry a shakpanch, or whatever it may be. So all those details, they will enhance the mood of the Vibhava. The Alambana Vibhava is the actual carrier of the emotions, who is supplemented, who is helped by these external paraphernalia, which is known as Uddipana Vibhava. Uddipana is enhancement. So that basic bhava will get enhanced by the Uddipana Vibhava, and then the actor is prepared to impart that bhava to the spectator. And for imparting, he will have to follow some act. That act is called Anubhava. The bhava is there. Now I am carrying that mood. I tried to understand what Rama would have done under these given circumstances. Now I am bearing that bhava in my mind. I am bearing the locale around me. I am prepared for my performance, and now this bhava will have to be followed by the action. That action is Anubhava. Anu is to follow. Anubhava is that action, and Bharata uses terms like Bhuvikshep, Kataksha, Netra Kataksha. All these things should be considered as Anubhava. In short, Abhinaya can be considered as Anubhava, the acting, the enaction. That can be considered as Anubhava, and for that you need to have some technical capacity. You will have to translate, you will have to reflect all those emotions on your face, and for that you need to learn the art of acting, the art of Abhinaya. It's the thing that transports, communicates the emotions to the spectator is the abhinaya. So the abhinaya should be such, the acting should be such that the exact emotion should be communicated to the spectator, right? And for that he says that there are 3 types of abhinayas which the actor will have to be learning, will have to be understanding. And he calls it Angika, Vachika and Aharya abhinaya. If you remember, there is a shloka in Natya Shastra where while bowing to Lord Shiva, Bharata says, Angikam bhuvanam yasya, Vachikam sarva vangmayam, Aharyam chandra taradi, tam namas satvikam shivam. Shiva is considered to be the art of the god of all the arts. He is the supreme actor. He is the supreme dancer. So for him, what is Angika Abhinaya? Angika Abhinaya is the Abhinaya which is to be done with the body. So all the expressions on the faces, all the body language, all the action, all the movements, all that thing will be considered as Angika Abhinaya. So for Shiva, Angikam Bhuvanam Yasya, whatever we see around you, every change that takes place in the world around you is Shiva's Angika Abhinaya. Vachikam Sarva Vangmayam, all the literature in all the languages is his Vachika Abhinaya. Aharyam Chandra Taradi, what is the local, what is the Uddipana Vibhava, what is the stage set for Shiva's act? Chandra Taradi, the universe is his stage set. And Tam Navas Satvikam Shivam, I bow to such a Shiva who is the supreme actor. But these 3 different types of acting, which is body language, diction, the dialogue delivery and use of local, can be acquired, can be taught. It can be imparted and it can be acquired. It can be you can undergo some training and learn the acting skills. But there is one more possibility of abhinaya. Now in Angika Abhinaya, you could learn the Aharya is a very interesting phenomenon. Aharya Abhinaya is using the locals. So even your choreography is a part of Aharya Abhinaya. Or using the property. Yesterday I was talking to the students and I told them that to show my anger, now I delivered my dialogue with tremendous anger. I also tried to show all my anger on my face. But I lift a paperweight and throw it away. Now perhaps that will create a greater impact. So what am I doing? This is Aharya Abhinaya. Instead of only using my body and my language, I am also using the Aharya. I am also using the local around me to create greater impact in my acting. So that is Aharya Abhinaya. And then there is the 4th Abhinaya which cannot be learned, which cannot be taught or which cannot be learned, that is Satvika Abhinaya. He says that there are Ashta Satvika Bhavas, there are 8 different kinds of expressions which are involuntary expressions. You can pretend to be angry, but at the same time, if you are really angry, you cannot pretend to be calm. You will try to control yourself and pretend that you are totally composed, but probably your body will keep trembling. Your face might get red and the other person will come to know that he is trying to control his anger, but inside he is burning. Or sometimes you try to hide your fear. If a dog is charging towards you, you will try to pretend that you are not afraid of that dog, but your pale face will tell everything to the people that how afraid you are. Or your knocking knees will betray your mental state over there. Now these expressions are involuntary expressions. You cannot control them. However hard you try, sometimes the tears roll down on your cheek. You try to hide your sorrow, but the tears roll down your cheek. All these involuntary expressions, he gives a list of it. He calls it Stambha, which means getting stunned, or Sweda, perspire, Romancha, getting goosebumps on your body, Swarabhanga, distortion of voice, Vaivarnya, turning pale, Ashru, tears, or Pralaya, breaking down, or turning red. All these things are Satvika Bhavas, Ashta Satvika Bhavas, which are involuntary Bhavas. But if you are a master actor, you can master these expressions also. A real actor is that who, along with the Angika, Vachika and Aharya Abhinaya, if he can do the Satvika Abhinaya, then he is a real actor. I must master the Ashta Satvika Bhavas also, then it will be a real expression of my emotions, and that will be the real Anubhava. So we talked about Vibhava, we talked about Anubhava. Now the thing is, Bharata talked about the Sthayi Bhava, and Sthayi Bhava is the principal mode. We know that every work of art has a principal mode. Every work of art, some of the films are horror films. We call it a horror film. We call it a comedy. We call it a tragedy. When we call it a tragedy, what we mean is the Sthayi Bhava of that play is Karuna. When we say comedy, what we mean is the Sthayi Bhava of that play is Hasya. You get my point? We are actually following Bharata by branding these expressions. In a way, we are following Bharata, because Bharata has already branded his expressions. He calls it Dasharupa Kandi. There are 10 different types of plays where the Sthayi Bhavas are different. So by this Sthayi Bhava, now if you see a comedy, there are some comedies which we call slapstick comedies. Why Govinda's comedy and Charlie Chaplin's comedy are not put at one level? Have you seen City Light? Or have you seen Modern Times? Have you seen Gold Rush? In Gold Rush, he goes with people in search of gold in the Western America. And finally, all these people who go there, they die of hunger. And Charlie Chaplin is shown chewing his own shoes and smoking a cigar which is thrown away by another person. Now, this pathos makes that humor much greater humor. Or if you see a film like City Lights, in City Lights, Charlie Chaplin, well, it's a hilarious film. You will keep laughing all the time in that film, and he is helping a blind girl to get her eyes operated. Now he is a beggar. He is begging money, and he pretends that he is a rich man, and tells that girl that don't worry, I'll manage to get your eyes back. He manages to get money from a millionaire, and that girl is operated. Now she is a blind girl. She gets operated. She thinks that some rich man has helped him. And when she is sitting at her flower shop, this man comes over there. Charlie Chaplin comes over there. And obviously, he is a beggar and she doesn't recognize him. Now this pathos makes that work of art a great work of art. As against that, if we see a film which is just a slapstick comedy and there is laughing and laughing and laughing at any cost, probably we will not consider that as a great work of art. Do you get my point? So a great work of art is not only a repetitive expression of the Sthayi Bhava. If you continue repeating the same central Sthayi Bhava, probably the work of art will be extremely monotonous. And here Bharata gives an example of a Vyanjana. A Vyanjana is a recipe. A Vyanjana is eatable recipe which the ladies prepare. And being ladies, you know it very well that even in a sweet recipe, the ladies add a pinch of salt or a pinch of bitter, and that enhances the taste of that sweet. This is a very commonly known fact. When we cook a spicy meal, there are so many other things which are added to it, and all those spices are not necessarily of the same taste. So there are complementary tastes, there are opposite tastes which come together and enhance the taste of the recipe. Now Bharata says that the work of art also has to follow the same philosophy. If you only go on projecting the Sthayi Bhava in your work of art, probably the expression will be extremely monotonous and boring. So you will have to add some other rasas in it. But those rasas should be in a perfect proportions. If you add a spoonful of salt to a sweet, probably it will spoil the sweet. So they should be added in a perfect proportion, but in a imaginative manner. Who do not have the capacity to reach the level of Sthayi Bhavas, like anxiety or worry. Now worry cannot be a Sthayi Bhava. There cannot be the whole play which is based on worry or which is based on anxiety. So there are several such Sthayi Bhavas which Bharata has listed down, which he considers as transient emotions. They can enhance the central emotion. Now suppose if Rati is the central emotion of the play and the Nayaka is waiting for the Nayika. That Naika has promised him that she will meet him in the Lata Kunja at a particular time, and she doesn't turn up over there. Now, what is the Sthai Bhava of this meeting? Obviously Rati, and it is leading to Shungar. He is hoping to lead to Shungar. Now that lady does not turn in time, so obviously the Rati will get converted into anger. There will be a pinch of, he will start getting angry that the lady did not come in time. Now this anger is a Vyabhichari Bhava over there. This anger is not real anger. He is getting angry with her. If he is going to meet his boss, and if the boss comes 10 minutes later, he will not get angry. He will say, "ठीक है यार, चलेगा, boss है." But if the girlfriend comes late, he will get angry because there is a base of Shringara to it. So this anger is born of Rati. If she gets further late, if she gets 30 minutes late or an hour late, probably he'll start getting anxious, and after 1 hour he'll start get worried. So this anxiety, this worry are the expressions of the love, are the expressions of the Rati. Actually, anger is not directly related to Rati. Anxiety is not directly related to Rati. Worry is not directly related to Rati. But all these transient emotions which come and go, which come for a very short while, they add to the gravity of Shringara. So, Vibhava, with Alambana Vibhava and Uddipana Vibhava, Anubhava and this Vyabhichari Bhava. Now, isn't it very curious that he thinks that Sthai Bhava is most important, but in this sutra, he does not mention Sthai Bhava. Vibhava, Anubhava, Vyabhichari, Sanyogat, Rasa, Nishpati. Where is the Sthai Bhava? विभाव आ गया, अनुभव आ गया, स्थायी भाव आ गया, हो गया रस. स्थायी भाव का क्या करेंगे? तो the obvious reason is he considers that स्थायी भाव cannot be given a place in this discussion because स्थायी is rooted in vasana. स्थायी is vasana sthita. This is very interesting. This argument is very, very interesting. Now, vasana is your personal emotion. स्थायी भाव, however great and however potent it might be, ultimately it is a personal sensual emotion. My anger, my love, my humor, this is a personal emotion, and that is why until that personal emotion does not leave behind that personal references and gets elevated further, it cannot be considered as a part of rasa. So these three things help the Sthai Bhava, ordinary Vasana Sthita Sthai Bhava, to get elevated to the level of rasa. And that is why Sthai is not mentioned in this Rasa Sutra. This is very interesting. Now these intricacies are very interesting. The Rasa Sutra is interesting, but at the same time, when you look into these intricacies, you will find every time you will find some new aspect of that statement. So this is how the rasa is created according to Bharata. Bharata made this statement, and it became almost a fountainhead for the aesthetic debate in the coming centuries. I told you that for a few centuries there is no aesthetic discussion in India till about 7th century. But from 7th, 8th century onwards, the Indian aesthetes started commenting on Bharata's theory.